Hello, and thanks so much for joining us on today's Learn with Google webinar. We're going to take a look at remarketing lists for search ads, and we're really excited to have you here. My name's Matt. I'm a marketing coordinator here at Google, and we also have Mike Lara here, who is a global search lead, and Glenn Watson will be helping moderate our question and answer. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping things, just to kind of familiarize yourself with the webinar console. The Q&A box you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen should already be open. Feel free to chat in your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Also use this box if you have any technical issues, and we will, again, do our best to get you back on track, make sure everything's going well for you. The resource widget is the green icon on the bottom. Feel free to use that to link to relevant articles, things we have linked up, as well as future Learn with Google webinars. And then also the survey widget. Please do fill that out before leaving. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us make our webinar experience better for you. So first, to kick things off, we're just going to start with a quick poll, just to kind of get a sense of the audience to see how well versed everyone is with today's content. So if you could just answer right on your screen, right within the slide window, how familiar are you with remarketing any type? So just go ahead and select your answer. We've got not familiar, somewhat familiar, and very familiar, and then hit submit, and we'll go from there just to see where everybody's at. And we can tailor the content a little bit closer to what's relevant to the audience today. I'll give you just one more second to make your selection. Great. Okay, so it looks like we've got the majority of people are somewhat familiar or very familiar. A few people still not familiar. That's completely fine. That just helps us to know where to base our information. So we'll do one more question just to really narrow in the results here. How familiar are you with remarketing lists for search ads? So this is more very specific to what we're going to be talking about today. Again, not familiar, somewhat familiar, very familiar. Let us know, and we will tailor the content to the audience today. Give you just one more second to finish that up and look at the results. Okay, a little bit less familiar with the RLSA concept. That's great. That's hopefully why you're here. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mike, who's going to lead us through the majority of the presentation. So Mike, take it away. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Matt. So we've got four different things we're going to go over today. One is a feature overview of RLSA. Then we'll get into usage strategies, some setup, and then finally some tips and tricks, which will hopefully be useful for not only the folks that are thinking about implementing this product, but who may have already done so and are looking for some new insights into it. So let's start off with the basic premise of RLSA. You have three people. They're searching for the exact same thing. They're searching to lease a BMW convertible. They're looking for some sort of long-term rental. And right now, advertisers tend to treat all these queries and all of these users as the same. So they're bidding a specific amount for people searching for this query. But these people are very different to the advertiser in terms of value, because specifically the person in the middle here has been to the advertiser's website before. And this is a very strong signal in search to give insight into not only where the user might want to come back to on the website and what they're looking for, but also just their overall value, how likely they are to convert. And so through remarketing lists, we get access to three things here. We know what's on our mind from the search query. We know that the context, the device, location, time of day. You've been able to target and now adjust bids based on those factors. Remarketing list adds this third factor here, the site activity, which is just a great tuning knob for fine-tuning your existing bids, targeting, and ad text, specifically for this user and what she's looking for. And so with RLSA, as mentioned, you can do a few different things. One is you can segment past site visitors in order to optimize ad text. That is, show a specific ad to a user that's been to a certain part of your website, is on that certain remarketing list, that speaks to what they may be looking for in this follow-up search. You can customize bids for them. Choose a more appropriate bid if the person is worth more or less to you on average, because you know where they've been on your site before. And then finally, you can try adding new keywords, keywords that may not have been profitable for you in the past when serving to all search users. You can restrict these keywords to only serve to those folks that have been to your site before, and you may end up with a higher conversion rate from those folks that turns these keywords from unprofitable to profitable. So the reason this is also important, research shows us that 96% of users leave a website on their initial visit without actually taking the action that marketers want them to. And so, currently right now your AdWords accounts may have no remarketing lists in place on the search side at all, so you simply have one set of bids, ads, and keywords. You may be able to create a list of those folks that visited any page on your site, a pretty broad list that has a pretty wide reach. And again, you can adjust your bids, ads, and keywords appropriately to those folks that have been anywhere on your website before. And then finally, you can get more advanced. Things like certain category page visitors, or those folks that have abandoned shopping carts, which we know, particularly in retail, have extremely high conversion rates if and when those users come back to the website. And so, you may be able to use stronger bids, maybe a strong offer in the ad text to close the sale for those folks. We think this is pretty easy to utilize. It's the same Google AdWords remarketing pixel that we use currently on remarketing on the display network, and now those lists are available in search via remarketing lists for search ads. And so here's just a few examples of some big results that we've seen from advertisers. World Travel Holdings was looking to improve their efficiency and did so by increasing bids for prior site visitors and adjusting their ad text. Torrendo and World Stores were looking for more top-line growth out of their AdWords accounts, and so used RLSA to bid pretty aggressively for past site visitors, and did manage to achieve that top-line sales growth they were looking for. And so here's a quote from an account specialist at iProspect that we've worked with. I'll let you folks read it, but I think it does speak to not only the reach that these remarketing lists can have when combined with search campaigns, but also just the efficiency that they bring as well, the degree to which you can get aggressive with bid adjustments and ad text adjustments and really improve your click-through rate and ROI as you're also increasing your traffic as well, because you're getting more of these users that tend to convert at a high rate to your site. So as far as usage strategies go, again, there's three main usages: customized ad text, adjusting bids, and broadening keywords. And this allows advertisers to sort of control which strategy they want to use based on whether their goal is to improve efficiency, increase their revenue, or some mix of both. So an example of an ad text optimization. So we have a telecoms provider in the U.S. that offers cable television service, voice telephone, and internet service. And so what they did was they customized their ads based on the product category viewed by the user on their initial visit, and then used those three main remarketing lists that they created, one for TV, one for voice, and one for internet service, to adjust the ad text and landing page for those users on subsequent brand searches when they searched again for this particular provider's brand. And they were able to reduce their cost per order on brand terms by 66%, which was pretty remarkable. So Torrendo, you may be familiar with, used a two-layered bid adjustment strategy. So for prior homepage visitors, they knew they'd have a slight increase in conversion rate, and so they made a moderate bid increase for that remarketing list. And then for those that have searched the site for a specific size or brand of tires, those folks that are maybe a little further down in the purchase cycle, they'd increase their bids significantly for those folks because they knew they were getting a higher conversion rate from those folks as well. And again, not only did they increase their total sales by 22%, but because this additional traffic that they got from these increased bids was specifically from those folks that had the highest conversion rates, they actually reduced their cost per order with these increased bids. And finally, iCrossing. In terms of broadening keywords, we all know that there's a bunch of evergreen keywords and some seasonal keywords that are just extremely competitive in each vertical or category within AdWords. And Virgin wanted to advertise on keywords like present and gift ideas during the peak holiday season, which is obviously the most competitive time for them. It's something that they couldn't really afford historically, and so they used remarketing lists for search ads to just target their bids on these keywords towards those folks that have been to their website before. And so by doing so, they were able to get a conversion rate on these super broad, super competitive keywords that was comparable to their brand terms with an ROI that was 30% better than what they were getting out of their non-brand terms. So as far as setup goes, I'd like to go over this really quickly here. All this is obviously available in the AdWords web interface. In the Audiences tab, you can add remarketing lists, and you can set your bid adjustments right there from the Audience tab as well. To create the remarketing list in the first place, you'd simply go to the shared library in AdWords. You're probably familiar with this. Most of you here, based on the poll, have probably done remarketing on the GDN in the past, so I'll kind of breeze through this here. But you can review your remarketing lists, and we create the all-site visitors list for you automatically. That's a very good place to start with RLSA. It's obviously the largest list that you'll have, and it tends to have a relatively good conversion rate when compared to overall AdWords traffic, so there is some opportunity, for example, to adjust bids right away. So for adding to the ad groups, head over to the Audience tab, click Add Remarketing Lists, and you're going to want to choose the list that you want to add, and you're going to set it to either target and bid or bid only. And that's a pretty important distinction to make. So target and bid means your ad group will only serve to that targeted audience, and you'll set a bid for it. And bid only means you're only adjusting the bid for that audience. So your ad group will continue to serve to all AdWords traffic, as it probably does right now, and you'll simply set a bid adjustment so that if a search user happens to be in that remarketing list, they will have their bid, your bid for them will be modified by the percentage that you set. And so traditionally, if you want to customize your ad text or broaden keywords, both of these would only apply to certain users that are on that, those users that are on the remarketing list. So you want to target your ad groups directly at those groups, and that way you can customize the ad text and the keywords in those ad groups and know that they will only serve to those users on the remarketing list. If you want to adjust bids, generally the easiest way to do this is to simply add the remarketing list as bid only, and this doesn't require any ad group duplication or anything like that. You simply set your bid adjustment, and it will be applied to the remarketing list as you've set, and you'll continue to get all your other traffic just like you always were. AdWords Editor allows bulk implementation of RLSA, simply copying and pasting. You can actually do this all in one step. It's easiest to understand in two parts. One is the Audiences tab, and that's used to add the audience, set it and set a bid adjustment. And the other is the Ad Groups tab, in which you indicate whether you want the target and bid or bid only settings applied to that ad group, as that is an ad group level setting. And so finally, tips and tricks. Let's go over some do's and don'ts for implementation of RLSA based on what we've seen over the last few months here since the product's been launched. First, as I mentioned earlier, we'd suggest trying RLSA with your largest remarketing lists first. This is generally your all-site visitors list. Typically, you still have the relevancy of the keyword as a signal of intent in search. So we find that you don't necessarily need a super granular, discrete remarketing list to have this relevancy. So typically we'd suggest starting with the largest list and seeing what kind of reach you get with it, and what kind of efficiency and how much possibility there is for adjusting bids and potential for changing ads. And then, if you feel like you're getting the most you can out of those large remarketing lists, then start to get more granular with those lists that may have even higher conversion rates, further down the purchase funnel. Optimize RLSA bid adjustments based on the segment performance relative to your campaign objective. And I'm going to throw the formula up here, but this simply says, if you're getting a 20%, if your target's 20% better than your actual, you can bid 20% higher via the bid adjustment. And finally, if you're unsure where to start, I can tell you the most common bid adjustment set by advertisers trying RLSA for the first time is between 20 and 25%, and this is typically applied to an all-site visitors list. That's the most common adjustment used. We have a really high rate with this product of people continuing to use it after their initial implementation, and the bid adjustments tend to go up from there. I think probably to around plus 100% is probably the long-term average, but people tend to be pretty satisfied if they do start with those conservative numbers, like around a plus 20, plus 25% for these lists. So that's not a bad place to start if you don't have any other idea of what you should do to begin with. So things we'd suggest not doing. Don't set up RLSA in hybrid search and display network campaigns. The reason for this is that audiences are applied in an ad group to both search and display when they're applied. And we find that the most common implementation for display is obviously a target and bid setting for the audience, which greatly restricts traffic on the search side too. If that was implemented that way, it restricts the search traffic to serve only to those folks on the remarketing list. So we would suggest splitting search and display campaigns. Typically you might want to apply as target and bid on display network and bid only on search. But that's up to you. But in any case, there just tends to be unintended consequences, with these hybrid campaigns when an audience list is added. So with target and bid, we have a minimum active cookie size of 1,000 or more in order to actually serve ads to the remarketing list. So if you set an ad group to target and bid before the audience has reached that 1,000 mark, it actually won't be able to serve until it hits that 1,000 mark. And then finally, we'd suggest trying to avoid making bid adjustment decisions based on small amounts of data. So, you have hundreds, maybe thousands, hundreds of thousands of ad groups in your accounts, and you're able to make a bid adjustment at the ad group level for each of your remarketing lists. The problem is a lot of times there's just such a small sample size of traffic, not only from these ad groups, but from the intersection of the keywords in the ad group and the audience being applied to that ad group. So what we typically suggest is looking at campaign or even accounts as a whole to see how the remarketing list converts relative to overall traffic, and using that overall figure to apply one uniform bid adjustment to each ad group in a campaign. Or even the account as a whole. So that way, you're using the largest sample size possible. And over time, if you feel like you do have a sense of how the list does overall, and you have a few high traffic ad groups, then maybe it makes sense to do an individual bid adjustment distinctively, uniquely to that high traffic ad group. But again, as a starting point, we'd suggest using the same bid adjustment across all ad groups in a campaign or account. And so that's it for our prepared content. So Glenn, our solution specialist over in the UK, has been looking over some questions that you've submitted thus far, and he'll read them out, and I will do my best to answer them. So please continue to feel free to submit questions, and we'll take as many as we can until the end of the presentation.
Mike, that was great. That was really good. Thanks. A big thank you for dialing in all the way from California. I know it's quite early out there. I know I've got a couple of attendees on the call that are also from California, so thank you to those guys and, of course, everyone. So, yeah, as Mike said, keep asking questions. A few I'm going to kick off with are around what tags you should be using. So a question about, can you use Google Analytics tags yet or to use remarketing list for search?
Yeah, so we don't have, so Google Analytics compatibility is actually the number one priority right now being worked on. So yeah, we don't have it yet. It'll be the next feature I think that we announce for RLSA. So as of right now, the compatible lists that we can work with are those created from the AdWords remarketing pixel, which you may know of as the Smart Pixel, the new AdWords remarketing pixel, and we're compatible with the tag-based lists and the URL rule-based lists.
Great. So there's quite a few questions based around this about being able to change ad copy in the existing or your existing ad group. So, like you can add a mobile special or a special ad for mobile, a mobile preference ad. When will it be possible to add a list preference ad? So only showing that ad to someone on a remarketing list.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually think what's going to come first is dynamically adjusted ads. So I think what we're working on right now, and I think what we'll be able to release before an audience preferred type of ad, is an ad in which there are parameters or placeholders. And so, let's say you are a pet's website, and you could create an ad that says, save money on blank food, and that blank is a parameter, a placeholder, and you can tell us based on the remarketing list that the user is on, if they're on list A, those people that have been to the dog food page, you can put dog in there. If they're on list B, which is the cat food page, you can put cat in there, that sort of thing. So I think that's how we're going to allow customized ads that reflect the audience list that the user is on, how we allow those customized ads to be just put into your existing ad groups without requiring any type of duplication or targeting or anything more complex like that.
So would you recommend first adding a bid modifier as a first guess and then duplicating the campaigns that have the highest volume for now, especially in terms of Christmas coming up? Is that your suggested strategy before the list preference? I think
that makes the most sense for, in terms of making sure you get the most bang for your buck, the most sort of return for your effort. So, at this point, you can apply bid adjustments for a marketing list to every single ad group in an account in about 5 minutes in AdWords Editor by just with some copying and pasting in the Make Multiple Changes box. I think, the potential for ad text optimization at this point, since it does require duplication, probably is best served to be done in those highest leverage, high traffic, strategically important keyword ad groups. So with the big holiday keywords, the big brand terms, that sort of thing.
Great. And then I've just got a question on setup. So how do you ensure if you have duplicate campaigns that you're not bidding on the same keyword for the same user?
So what happens is we have AdWords uses a set of trumping rules to determine which ad from your account gets sent to the auction. And so what we do is if you have a campaign with a certain keyword that's being searched for and a duplicate that's targeted at a remarketing list that this user happens to be a member of, so the first item in the trumping rule order is obviously keyword and match type. And so assuming you've correctly copied the keyword and match type into your audience targeted duplicate, the very next step in the trumping order is audience membership. And so because this user is a member of the remarketing list, any ad in that ad group will trump any ad in the original. And so we'll say, okay, we're only going to submit this audience targeted ad to the auction. And so this trumping for audience comes before even things like bid. And so even if you're bidding lower for that user in the audience targeted copy, or excuse me, bidding lower for the audience targeted copy, because that audience targeting comes first in the trumping rules, that's actually the one that'll get sent to the auction to ensure you're not competing against yourself, basically.
And if you have multiple audience lists in the same ad group, so you start with a master list and then you add a more specific list, is it a quality score that will determine which list is used to serve an ad for that keyword?
So we use bid adjustment as the first, as the first, I guess, trumping in that case. So if the user's on two different qualifying remarketing lists, then whichever one has the highest bid adjustment is the one that's going to send the ad to the auction and get credit for the impression, potential click, and conversion. If the bid adjustments are the same for both, then yeah, it would be a quality score-based thing. If for some reason there's differing history among the copies of the keywords, although that's probably unlikely.
So I just want to take this back to 100 feet. I've got a question here about it's the same remarketing lists, the same audience lists that people have been using for display that they can now use within search.
Yeah. So if you've made these lists with the AdWords remarketing pixel, then yes, we're compatible with just about all of them. I can't quite say all because some of the custom parameter lists made from the AdWords pixel we can't yet use for privacy restriction purposes. But when you use the AdWords pixel, you get that all site visitors list that's created for you automatically that you may be using. So that's automatically eligible for RLSA. You can create lists based on the specific URLs on your website that the user may have visited. All of those that you may be using in display remarketing, all of those are eligible for RLSA as well.
So building on that, there's a question here about custom parameters, which are available for the Google Display Network. They're not currently available for remarketing lists for search, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, this is a compatibility that we'd obviously love to have, and it's just a matter of kind of making sure that our privacy policy is respected with any potential compatibility that we develop there.
Sure. And you said that for target and bid, the list size is 1,000 users for remarketing list for search in order to function. If you have a bid-only modifier, is that still the case that it's 1,000 users for the bid adjustment to occur?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if your list is 999, the bid adjustment won't be applied, and it'll only start being applied once you reach that 1,000 threshold. And I should say too, if you go over the 1,000 list size, and then for whatever reason the list size drops back under, again it stops serving, or the bid adjustment stops being applied until you're back over 1,000. And this is another just another privacy restriction we have. Yeah.
So you want to be well above the 1,000, so you don't have a game where you're constantly dipping above and below.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's best. Yeah. So I mean, if you think you might, with your current settings, you might be sort of on the threshold there. Anything you can do, like maybe increasing the duration of list membership or something like that might help you stay well above the 1,000 is obviously helpful. Yeah.
So I have a question about using user lists as negatives. Is that possible? And on that, should they be using the conversion list as a negative, or should they for Christmas be bidding up for users that have previously converted on the site?
Right. So it's easy to determine this if you have conversion tracking. What we'd suggest that you can do is simply add the remarketing list as a bid only with a 0% bid adjustment. So no change to your ad serving whatsoever, but we start tracking that audience for you, all the metrics for it, in the Audiences tab. And so this will show you of your existing AdWords traffic without making any changes, what portion of this traffic, your impressions, your clicks, your costs, and conversions are coming from the remarketing list. And you can make the decision yourself. If you're getting a higher conversion rate out of those people that are on the list of prior converters, then yeah, it would probably make the most sense to bid up. As far as excluding, you can do that with RLSA. So it's an ad group or a campaign level exclusion setting. Typically, we would recommend using bid modifiers, bid adjustments instead, because for most folks, even those that have subscription-based conversion events, like a Groupon or something like that, we've noticed in testing that they actually still get conversions out of remarketing list members that have already converted. And this is, of course, because certain households may share computers, and so two different family members may convert and sign up for Groupons on their individual email addresses, each for their individual category of deals that they're interested in. So, if you add the +0 bid adjustment just to start getting some data, it'll answer this question for you, and it'll probably be the case that one way or another the bid adjustment will be the best route to go.
So to clarify, we can add the 0% bid modifier to all campaigns, so you just get returning and new user data for each campaign, and then with data with the data you're accumulating, you can then start changing the bid modifiers from there. So you're adding nothing, you're not changing anything in terms of what's being served in the account, but you're getting those insights of new versus returning users.
Exactly. Yep. No actual changes, and this is just showing you. It's just segmenting the current the performance that you're getting along the lines of audience and non-audience. Yep.
That sounds great. So building on that question, a lot of people have some lists in their account on certain pages. They don't have a master list yet. So you'd advocate to build a master list and have tag on every page of your website. But what other pages should advertisers be starting with if they don't have a master list yet?
Okay. Yeah, so definitely that master list is probably the most important because it has the largest reach. And what we notice is, there's properties, let's say for a retail website, direct response, shopping cart based site, homepage or all site visitors tend to convert 50% more than AdWords traffic as a whole. If you create a remarketing list of deeper pages on the site, you get a slightly higher conversion rate of those folks that have visited those deeper pages, but you lose a little bit of the reach, obviously. So that's why we suggest starting with those broad lists. Other things that advertisers do, in general, there's 4 or 5 tiers that you could sort of create. You could create an all-site visitors list. You could create, if you have different categories on your site, maybe a category. A user has visited a category page list. A user has visited a product page list. A user has abandoned a shopping cart list. And finally, a user has converted, has completed their shopping cart purchase list. And so with those 5, you can monitor their traffic in the Audiences tab. Even if you don't want to initially change your bids, you can just set a +0% and take a look at how each of those audience members convert, and then just set a bid adjustment for each of those folks based on exactly the performance that you're seeing from them.
And that's obviously a great way to show the impact of this and to go on to build a master list. Once you have that master list, are you able to then create lists, more specific lists, that will pre-populate with audience data so they'll be ready to go straight away? Or do lists based on the master lists need to populate after they are built?
Yeah, so they still would need to populate after they're built, which obviously takes more or less time depending on how much website traffic you have. But obviously, it's ready to go and start serving once it hits 1,000. Even if it ultimately is going to get to 1 million, it should be ready to go very quickly once it hits that 1,000 mark.
Great. So there's a question here on duration. So in terms of collecting users, the maximum for display is 540 days, and for a remarketing list for search is 180 days. Would you still suggest that for a master list you collect users for the maximum duration for branding purposes, and then for performance maybe have more specific lists for smaller cookie windows?
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy, definitely. Yeah, I mean it's always great to just start with the with that master list in 180-day duration. That's sort of your largest possible reach with the product. So it's always great to be able to have that list so that you can test and see what the kind of the total opportunity is, the total reach that you can obtain. And then I think there's a compelling reason to make 30-day or even 7-day durations for some of your more targeted lists if that's what the consideration cycle is for a given product or service.
Great. So I've got a question on Google Tag Manager. Someone's already installed Google Tag Manager on every page of their website. So going back to the master list, are they able to just add a single tag to Google Tag Manager and set a rule to fire on every single page of the website? Is that right?
Yeah, actually, they don't even need a rule. You just add the pixel itself, and that'll get the pixel put on every page that the tag manager's on, and it'll create automatically a tag-based list, which is simply every page in which that marketing tag was fired, which will hopefully be every page on their site. So yeah, just throw the pixel in and you're all set. If you want, then you can create URL rules for certain categories of pages. If you're a travel site, for example, yoursite.com/hotels or /search if you want to track, make a remarketing list for all those folks that have used the search feature on your site, that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Now, just going to reporting, a couple of people have noticed that there's no average position data yet in the Audiences tab where you report on your returning users for Remarketing List for Search. When will average position data be available for the Audiences tab?
Probably, I would say less than 2 weeks is what I expect on this one. So that's the next feature that it's done. It's just in the launch process at this point, and we kind of ramp it up. So hopefully you'll see that in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have average position and top versus other or top versus side reporting, so we can show you what percentage of the time you were serving in the top above the natural search results, and what time portion of the time you're on the side or on the bottom or in some other format.
So that will obviously help in terms of bid modifiers, knowing how far you want to go with your bid modifications. So if you're in position 3.4, for example, it might require a larger bid modifier to really get the most out of your Remarketing List for Search ads and get into the more premium positions, maybe 1 and 2, which you couldn't afford to be at all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great source of feedback, and frankly, the only reason we didn't have it in there from the start was because we kind of piggybacked on a bunch of infrastructure that was built for display, where average position isn't quite as important as it is obviously on search. And so that was kind of the one thing we had to build ourselves after we piggybacked on a little bit of the display infrastructure. So, yep.
We're going to go and test your AdWords editor knowledge now. I've got a question about adding bid-only bulk changes to all of the campaigns and editors. So someone wants to add a master list to every single ad group. Is that possible to do it at a bid-only level?
Yep. So you can do that. You can do that via copying and pasting text in the Make Multiple Changes. Probably what's easier though is if you simply go to the Ad Groups tab. So if you, on the left-hand side of Editor, in the navigation tree, just click on the top, the account as a whole, and click on your Ad Groups tab, and that'll show in your scroll list every single ad group in the account. Just Control A to select all, and under let's see, where is it? I think it's Flexible Reach. Then you can select bid only under Flexible Reach. Yeah, so Flexible Reach, Interest in Remarketing, and select bid only, and that'll apply to all the ad groups that you've highlighted, which in this case could be all of them. So yeah, point and click.
So we're getting a lot of feedback, which is positive, on the master list. A couple of people asking about the master list being created by default in the account. Now, the next step, obviously, when it's created in AdWords, is that you have to get that tag onto the site before you can start collecting users. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So AdWords will generate the pixel with a unique label for your specific account, and then it's up to you to speak with your webmaster, get that onto your website, maybe in the footer or something, so that it ends up getting displayed on every single page. And then from there you can manage, so we'll create that tag-based list of all site visitors, all visitors to any single page that you have the pixel placed on. And from there you can create the URL rule-based lists to sort of segment further if you'd like.
Okay, so we're answering a lot of questions. Please do keep sending them in. We're having loads of questions, so I'm going to try and get through as many of these as possible. Let me just find another question here. One that's coming up quite a lot is target and bid. So if you only want to show a keyword to an existing audience member, not to users that have never been to the site before, is it best to put lots of more generic keywords that you maybe have paused previously into a separate ad group and add the target and bid feature?
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what we'd suggest. And I'm actually working on a report right now that we're hopefully going to be able to get out to our account management team soon that identifies these keywords for you that that you may have tried historically that are in the account right now, either as paused or deleted, that you may be able to try again, but only serving to those folks that are on your remarketing list, knowing or hoping that they have that higher conversion rate, and thus these keywords can be profitable for you, and you can start getting some impression share on some of these these biggest, broadest kind of top tier keywords in your vertical.
So in terms of next steps, we've got Christmas coming and we've got the travel peak in Q1. For advertisers that aren't doing anything, what are the 2 or 3 next steps that they should be taking to take advantage of remarketing lists for search ads?
Okay, so definitely, obviously get the pixel on your site. So generate that in AdWords if you haven't already, and get that on your site as quickly as you possibly can. I come from the retail. Well, actually, I worked in travel for a company called TripAdvisor, managing their SEM before I came to Google. And my first few years at Google were in retail. So the one thing I can suggest is that this sort of the peak season for retail seems to start earlier and earlier in the year every year. So the sooner you can get this pixel on your page and start building your remarketing list of people that have been to your website before and maybe familiar with how it looks, how to navigate it, that sort of thing, maybe have used some products, the better. I would start with, if you're strapped for time, I would just start with that all-site visitors list. Add it as a plus 0% or a plus 20% or something in the account as bid only, and start getting some data and see how it converts for you. And if our overall averages hold, it'll probably be the case that the members of your remarketing list will convert at probably twice the rate of overall AdWords traffic. So you'll be able to get pretty aggressive for those high-value users as the holiday season really hits full swing. And then I would say too, as you get into peak season for retail and travel, I'd probably keep an eye, day to day or every couple of days on the remarketing list itself. Obviously conversion rates overall are going to go up during this period, but it may be the case that you see an increased conversion rate specifically among those prior site visitors as well. So keep an eye on how that works for you over time, and set the bid adjustment accordingly.
It's funny you mentioned that Christmas is coming earlier and earlier, because I think a lot of our shops in the UK are starting to put Christmas decorations up. So it's definitely time to start planning for that if you haven't already. So, question on MCC level user lists. So can you share lists across accounts, and can you share them at an MCC level?
You can, yes. So you can share them across accounts. We don't have any notion of MCC yet, so whether or not these accounts of yours that you want to share them across are in an MCC or not, there's no difference. One restriction we have for remarketing lists for search ads that we don't have for display is that we don't allow any third party or any list sharing. So you can't, Foot Locker or some shoe retailer cannot share their remarketing list with a shoe manufacturer if they're different entities. So we require that all accounts that share remarketing lists be linked as equivalent, and thus they can only serve one ad in the auction. So this is not an issue for most advertisers, but for those that do have multiple distinct sort of sub-brands that as of right now can serve side by side in a given auction, in that case, you cannot share your remarketing list across those accounts.
So I've got a question on troubleshooting. Someone's getting 11,500 unique users to their website a month, and yet they're only seeing a few hundred users populate on their master list. Now, is there a technical issue on the tag, or do you think it's not being implemented correctly on the website?
Let's see. So there could be, I guess there's a few possibilities here, and by the way, this applies to anyone with any website of any size. So if they have it in a container tag, basically there's just a few hops along the way in which we could somehow lose the pixel. So if they have the pixel in a container tag, especially if it's not the Google Tag Manager container tag, that adds a little bit of latency to the pixel serving, and we could lose some portion of users there. Likewise, if there's a bunch of redirects on the site or in the process of the way that the users get to their site, it's possible they could be losing the pixel somehow in that process as well. Other than that, I mean, it sounds like they're losing too high of a percentage to be able to simply write it off as something like people clearing their cookies or using something like a Chrome incognito browser. I mean, without more detail, I can't troubleshoot too much. But if they have a Google account team, it's probably worth highlighting to them and seeing if we have any resources here at Google that can help look into it and troubleshoot.
So usually, if the discrepancy is more than about 10 to 20%, you suggest that contacting a Google account representative or account
I think so.
manager.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say more than 20%. Yeah, I mean, I think 10 to 20% is possible, depending on just a well-intentioned setup that just has a lot of containers and other things going on, maybe a conversion tracking, an internal and other analytics solutions that they're using. But more than that is probably is worth seriously looking into. Yeah.
So similar audiences, similar to existing user lists for display, is currently available. When is that going to be available for search lists?
That's a good question, and it's a good idea. It's something we've thought about. We have, so relative to display, search, Google obviously has a lot more privacy sensitivities, and that's been the biggest hurdle so far with developing a similar audience type of reach. So I guess, I mean, to be frank, I'll probably say it's going to be a while, since we really haven't started on it yet. Basically, the process is we need to come up with a proposal that we then reach out internally to our privacy team and make sure it clears their standards. And if it does, then we start working on it. How we build this, I don't know, but I think it is pretty exciting. I think the possibility is certainly exciting from a search perspective with the data we have available, and hopefully the reach that we can give advertisers with lists of similar users. It's just a matter of, again, ensuring that our privacy requirements are met, and we're not compromising the user's privacy or expectations.
So is it possible to split your lists or use AdWords campaign experiments in order to test remarketing lists for search ads performance?
Splitting lists is not possible. So that's a custom parameter-based method that's available in display. AdWords campaign experiments, yes, is possible. So AdWords campaign experiments lets you set certain ad groups as being a part of your control group and some others as your experimental group. And so what you can do is basically duplicate a handful of ad groups, set the originals as control, and in the duplicates you can set your let's say you can add your audience as a bid only and make a bid adjustment, and that way you can then compare the traffic and performance of both your originals and your duplicates, which are being served up side by being partitioned by AdWords campaign experiments, and actually see how much increased traffic you can expect in conversions and cost from your bid adjustments. So campaign experiments is a pretty good solution there. Yeah.
Great. So we've got less than 8 minutes left for questions. I'm going to go back to 2 areas that are recurring themes and just require a bit more clarification. The first is Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and Smart Pixel. So just clarifying that you can't use remarketing list for search ads with Google Analytics, and Google Tag Manager is used to contain the Smart Pixel. And the Smart Pixel is the only pixel that you can use remarketing list for search ads for. Is that correct?
That's all correct. Yep. And one thing I'll add too is, if you're using Google Analytics, hopefully you're really happy with the product. Make your remarketing lists in Google Analytics. Even if you're really hoping to use some remarketing lists with RLSA in the future on search, we're going to have this compatibility. It's going to come soon. And so, don't stop yourself from creating these lists now. Just create them, build up the list size so that, as soon as we've finished building out this compatibility, that very next day you can just hit the ground running with a full-size list and get started right away on RLSA.
Cool. So before people start dropping off, I just want to mention that we've got a survey from today's webinar. So please do fill that in so we know what you guys thought of today's webinar, the presentation, and the Q&A section. That would really be great if you could all answer that. The second area that's causing a bit of confusion is bid only and target and bid. So bid only targets campaigns that have new and returning users. You can just change your bid modifier for returning users, whereas target and bid is just for the users on a remarketing list. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, and I really don't like the what we call those, because it is completely confusing. So bid only means you're only adjusting your bids for the remarketing list. Target and bid means you're targeting precisely that remarketing list and you're not reaching anybody else. Yep.
So I always think that you should call it bid modifier only. So the bid modification is that, whereas target bid is, you're targeting just the remarketing list and you're using the bid to target that remarketing list. But I agree, the terminology does throw up lots of confusion. So and I think there's lots of resources available to clarify that if you need any more help on that. So for the last 5 minutes of questions, if I set up an ad group to adjust bids, will I be serving my ads to serve traffic and my remarketing list campaign? So that again is bid modification. So that's new and returning users. I've got a question here about case studies. So do we have specific questions or specific case studies on specific verticals, and where are those available?
Yeah, so reach out to your Google rep or Google team for that. Let's see, off the top of my head, we have auto, retail, travel. I think we have a white labeled finance. But yeah, we have an example from most verticals at this point, and maybe even a couple from particularly retail and travel, which are probably our 2 strongest verticals at this point.
Sure, and we know that on average, I think the stat is about 48% lower CPA for returning users versus a campaign that's not using remarketing list for search. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what we did. We took a look at advertisers that use conversion tracking and had remarketing lists and segmented them by vertical. And we wanted to see how these audiences perform, before we even start making bid adjustments or optimizing creative. What's the base that we're working with here? And yeah, it turns out that across all verticals, the average user on a remarketing list has a 48% lower CPA than the users for AdWords as a whole. And so, that kind of tells you that there's pretty significant opportunity to leverage some increased bids for those folks and get more traffic from them. And again, and get those results like I went over earlier, and we have in more detail from your Google team in case study form, where you're increasing your bid, but you're actually improving your ROI by doing it and reducing your cost per order or reducing your CPA, because the extra users that you're reaching with that increased bid convert higher than your overall average conversion rate. So it's pretty remarkable that you can both improve your ROI and increase your conversions, both by increasing your bids. It's a little counterintuitive, but it's just because of the fantastic targeting property of remarketing lists.
This is probably going to be the last question, and it's building on the target and bid setting. So if you have a separate remarketing list for search campaign using target and bid, is it best practice for your new customer campaign, so the campaign not using remarketing list for search ads, is it best practice to use the remarketing list that you have as negatives?
You can. You don't have to because of our trumping rules. They ensure that if someone is on the remarketing list, like I was saying earlier, if someone's on the remarketing list, the trumping rule will ensure that only ads from those remarketing list targeted ad groups will be eligible for the auction. For your own sort of comfort or security, you certainly can add them those lists as exclusions in the original campaigns, but it's not necessary. Yeah.
So thanks, Mike. I want to thank everyone again for joining. We've got loads of questions here. I've tried to get all the common themes together to ask Mike, but do use the hashtag for Twitter or Google Plus to ask any questions that you still have and you feel haven't been answered. And I might ask Mike to help me answer as many of those as possible. But Mike, thanks again for calling in at 9 o'clock in the morning from California. But just before we leave, can you just go over your next steps again? Because I thought that was really good. So your next steps for people that aren't currently doing anything and what they can do after the webinar.
Yeah. So in AdWords, generate the remarketing pixel if you haven't already, and get that onto your website, preferably in the footer or some way to ensure that the pixel appears on every page of your site. Do that as soon as possible because you can conceivably start accumulating users right now, before the peak holiday seasons, so that your lists are pretty populated by the time November, December rolls around for retail and January for travel. Once you have those remarketing lists, the most common bid adjustment that advertisers initially set is around plus 20 or plus 25%. It's fairly conservative. They tend to increase from there, so that's a good place to start. If you're really kind of nervous about things and just want to take a look at the data to begin with, simply set a plus 0% bid adjustment, which will, again, change nothing about how your ads serve or compete in the auctions. It won't change your traffic at all, but it'll start showing you the data for those members of your audience in the Audiences tab. And from there, especially if you have conversion tracking, you can very easily see how they perform relative to your overall traffic and then pretty quickly make some well-informed bid adjustments and start getting more aggressive.
Mike, thanks again very much, and thanks everyone for dialing in. My last point is just going to be please answer the survey and before you leave, and have a great day.
Thanks a lot, everyone.